So when we left off on chapter 14, I really like the end part of that. At the very end, it says, inside his house, a kid gets one name, but on the other side of the door, it's whatever the rest of the world wants to call him. I love how Jeffrey Magee is fitting in an area where people don't naturally fit in based on their skin color. And so he's a white kid from West End. Well, he's not really from West End. He's a white kid fitting in with the black kids and families that are on East End. And what I think is neat about it is that they have welcomed him in and they like him for who he is. I think that's great advice. Just be who you are, be yourself, and people will appreciate you for it. So chapter 15 is where we pick up today. It says, Maniac's fame spread all over East End. The new white kid who lived with the Beals at 728 Sycamore, who ran the streets before the fathers went out, who could poleaxe a stickball like a 12th grader and catch a football like hands down, who was allergic to pizza, who jumped up in Bethany Church and shouted, hallelujah and amen. Little kids, especially preschoolers, came from all over, bringing him their knots. They had heard about him from Hester and Lester. They had heard he could untie a sneaker knot quicker than a kid could spend a quarter. The bigger kids came around too for other reasons, from Moore Street and Arch Street and Chestnut and Green, heading for the vacant lot to check out the new kid, to test him, to see if everything they had heard was true, to see how good he really was and how bad. They found out he could do more with a football than just catch it. He could run like a squirrel. He juked and jived and spun and danced and darted, and he left them squeezing handfuls of air. Pretty soon the vacant lot was littered with blown sneakers and broken hearts. He didn't do much talking, but he didn't have to. Hands down did it for him. Every time he scored a TD or cracked a home run, Hands was bent over in his face talking trash. Do it, man. Smoke them suckers. Poke them. Joke them. You bad dude. You the baddest. Fight me, Judge. Fight me, Jude. Sorry. And they high-fived and low-fived and back-fived, and Hands Down would laugh and laugh. I like Hands Down. It's kind of like his hype man. Maniac loved trash talk. The words were different, but in some strange way, they reminded him of church. It had spirit. It's what they called soul. Pretty soon, he was talking trash with the rest of them. And pretty soon, he brought it home. Mrs. Beale was pressing her famous meatloaf into a baking pan one day when Maniac started talking his trash to her. Her eyes shot open. She straight, "What'd you say?" He said some more. At first, she couldn't believe her ears. When she did believe him, she didn't like it. She didn't like this boy bringing the vacant lot into her kitchen, and she didn't like how it fit his mouth. So she just put a stop to it right then and there and slapped that trash-talking mouth. Her lips started to quiver before his, but before she could say, "I'm sorry," he was hugging and squeezing her and burying his face into her chest and sobbing, I love you, I love you, I love you." Thank you. And he loved the quiet times after Hester and Lester went to bed. That's when he read Amanda's books. When he had gone through about half of them, he figured it was time to tackle the encyclopedia. Encyclopedia A. Problem was, Amanda was always reading it, and she vowed she wasn't giving it up, not even to Maniac, till she read everything from Aardvark to Aztec. To make matters worse, the supermarket offer had expired, so there was no other volumes. The more Amanda would not let go of the A, the more Maniac wanted it. He reached the point where she had to hide it wherever she wasn't reading it. Unbeknownst to her, Maniac always found it. He would get up even earlier in the morning, read it by flashlight for a while, sneak it back, and then go trotting with Bow Wow. And sometimes Maniac just sat at the front window, being on the inside. Maniac loved almost everything about his new life, but everything did not love him back. We're on chapter 16. Can you get your book and sit somewhere different, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So the kids really like Maniac Magee. He's pretty much good at everything. Like, is there anything he's not good at? And actually, I shouldn't say good at. He's like the best. So he can play football with the older kids. He's really fast. He can catch. He can run. He can untie crazy knots. Thought that was interesting. It's an odd detail. What else can he do really well?
I forget.
But we just listed a whole bunch of them. He cleans, yeah. He cleans more than most kids, right? Like in his room.
I clean my room every day.
Good. So he cleans. What else can he do? I want to hear from you guys.
Laundry.
He can play football. He can clean.
He can play baseball.
He can play baseball, and not just play baseball, but the dude that strikes out 26 people in a row, he can even hit that dude's fastball.
He can play football.
He can play football. He can run fast. He can run for a long distance. Yeah.
He can run.
And plus he can catch a ball with one hand. Football with one hand.
He's not just great at football, but he's so good he can, like Odell Beckham Jr. style, like catch a one-handed football.
Odell.
Okay, Odell. Thank you. So he can catch a football with one hand, and I'm guessing he's probably not wearing those grippy gloves either, right? Like he's just this little kid catching it. He's squirrely, he's fast. He treats kids really well. Like I like the way that he treats the little brother and sister. He reads to them. He likes to read. He's an avid reader. It's interesting to see how many different things he's good at. Something else he's really good at is making friends with people that are very different than him. Which again, that's not something that everybody can do. Chapter 16, Maniac Magee was blind. Sort of. Oh, he could see objects all right. He could see a flying football or John McNabb fastball better than anybody. He could see Mars Bar's foot sticking out trying to trip him up as he circled the bases for a home run. He could see Mars Bar's charging from behind to tackle him even when he didn't have a football. He could see Mars Bar's bike veering for a nearby puddle to splash water on him. He could see things, but he couldn't see what they meant. He couldn't see that Mars Bar disliked him, maybe even hated him. When you think about it, it's amazing all the stuff he didn't see. Such as big kids don't like little kids showing them up. And big kids like it even less if another big kid, such as Hands Down, is laughing at them while that little kid is faking them out of their Fruit of the Looms. And some kids don't like a kid who is different, such as a kid who's allergic to pizza, or a kid who does dishes without being told, or a kid who never watches Saturday morning cartoons, or a kid who's another color. Maniac kept trying, but he still couldn't see it. This color business. He didn't figure he was white any more than the East Enders were black. He looked himself over pretty hard and came up with at least 7 different shades and colors right on his own skin. Not one of them being what he would call white, except for his eyeballs, which weren't any whiter than the eyeballs of the kids in East End. Which was all a big relief to Maniac, finding out he wasn't really white, because the way he figured it, white was about the most boring color of all. But there it was, piling up all around him. Dislike, not from everyone, but enough. A Maniac couldn't see it, and then, all of a sudden, he could. Chapter 17, it was a hot day in August. It was so hot, if you stood still too long in the vacant lot, the sun bouncing off a chunk of broken glass or metal could fry a patch on your hide. So hot, if you were packing candy, you'd have soup in your pocket by 2 o'clock. So hot, the dogs were tripping on their own tongues. And so hot, the fire hydrant at Green and Chestnut was gushing like Niagara Falls, courtesy of someone wrenching off the cap. You guys ever seen that before?
Yeah.
See it quite a bit in bigger cities, especially up north. I'd see like up in Chicago and New York City. When it gets so hot, like they don't have public pools the same way like you might see around here with subdivisions that have a pool or places to go. So sometimes, I don't know if the fire department does it, but they'll open up a fire hydrant and then the water's like spraying out and it's just this one big massive sprinkler system. Yeah, and like kids are playing in the water and the water shoots out on the street, and that's a typical scene in more urban areas where there's a heavy population, a lot of people, pretty dense populations. And so hot, the fire hydrant at Green and Chestnut was gushing like Niagara Falls, courtesy of someone wrenching off the cap. By the time Maniac and the rest of the vacant lot regulars got there, Chestnut and Green was a cross between a block party and a swimming pool. Radios blaring, people blaring, somebody selling lemonade, somebody selling Kool-Aid ice cubes on toothpicks. Bodies, skin, colors, water, gleaming, buttery, warm, cool, wet, screaming, happy. The younger you were, the fewer clothes you had on. Grown-ups sat on the sidewalks and dangled their bare feet in the running gutters. Teenagers stripped down to bathing suits and cutoffs. Little kids, underwear, littlest kids, nothing. Maniac danced and pranced and screamed with the rest. He learned how to jump in front of the gusher and let it propel him halfway across the street. He joined in a snake dance. He got goofy. He drenched himself all in the wet and warm and happy. When he first heard the voice, he didn't think much of it, just one voice. One voice in hundreds, but then the other voices were falling away in bunches until only this one voice was left. Why did Maniac go to the fire hydrant?
He was hot.
He was hot. Simple as that, right? He's a kid, he's hot, and he wants to get wet, cool off. My guess is the same reason that everybody else went to that. And suddenly people are noticing that he's different, but they're all there for the same reason. But sometimes certain people can't let those differences go. It was a strange voice, deep and thick and sort of clotted as though it had to fight its way through a can of worms before coming out. The voice was calling behind him, saying the same word over and over again, calling a name. And even then, Maniac turned only because he was curious, wondering what everybody was staring at. But when he saw the brown finger pointed at him, not a speck of icing on it, and the brown arm that aimed it, and the brown face on it, he knew the name was coming out of the can of worms' mouth. He knew the name coming out of the can of worms' mouth was his. Whitey. And it surprised him that he knew. He just stood there blinking through the water drop. Sun blur, the hydrant gushers smacking his thin bare ankles, the radios, the people were silent. Hey, you move on now, Whitey, the man said. You pick up your gear and you move out. Time to go home now. Man was close enough to be catching some water around his shoes, which Maniac noticed were actually slippers. His pants were baggy. His shirt wasn't really a shirt, but a pajama top covered with high-tailed roosters. His hair curled around his ears. Maniac gave him his answer. I am home. The man took a step closer. He dropped his arm. You go home now, son. Back to your own kind. I seen you at the block party. Now you get going. Maniac stepped out of the gusher. The water roared on the opposite side of the current. This is where I live. I live right down here. He pointed towards Sycamore. The man didn't seem to notice. Never enough, is it, Whitey? Just want more and more. Won't even let us to our little water in the street. Come on down to see the Bojangles. Come on down to the zoo, the monkey house. He must be hard of hearing, Maniac thought. So he called it out really loud and slow and pointed again. I live at 728 Sycamore. I do. The old man stepped closer. Now you got your own kind. That's how you wanted it. Let's keep it that way now. Move on. Your kind's waiting. He flung his finger westward. Up there. Why is he pointing to the west end?
Because that's why the white kids live.
Because that's where all the white kids live. Why is this guy so mad?
Because he didn't know, he probably didn't know that there was a white kid on the street, and he was mad because
There's a white kid on the street, and this guy's mad about it. Now, I'm just taking a guess. I'm inferring here. Do you think that this guy knows Jeffrey Magee?
No.
No. And do you think that maybe his opinion of Jeffrey Magee would change if he got to know him?
Yes.
But that guy's making a judgment call based on what?
His skin color.
His skin color.
Judge a book by its cover.
It's great advice. And I feel so bad for Jeffrey as a kid having to hear something like that. Because he's being cast out because of his differences, because he looks different. Maybe he dresses different. We know his skin color is different. And here's this person saying, get out of here, you don't belong here. Suddenly, Hester and Lester were up by Maniac's side, barking at the man. You leave him alone! Old rag picker, you shut up! And the man was croaking, ranting, not to Maniac, but now to the people. What happens when we go over there? Black is black, white is white. The sheep lie not with the lion. The sheep know his own kind. A woman was rushing in, then pulling him away up the street. Our own kind, our own kind. The water thundered across the silent street. Who stuck up for Jeffrey in that moment?
Hester and Lester.
I love that the little kids like Hester and Lester jump in. They're like, leave him alone. Maniac, who's one of the world's greatest sleepers, didn't sleep well that night or the next. He started getting up earlier than usual, not to sneak some time with the A-book, just to run. Bow Wow wasn't even ready for his morning pee yet, but he went along. Usually, Maniac just jogged around the East End. Now he did the whole town, plus over the river to Bridgeport. By the third day, Bow Wow refused to go along. One morning, as Maniac was heading home, Hester and Lester came running up Sycamore. Maniac, come on, we're going to run too. Let's go that way. They tried to turn him around, but he told them to just hold on a minute. He wanted to stop home for a quick drink, and then he'd go running with them. They kept yelling and tugging and pushing and grabbing his legs, and then Amanda was pedaling frantically up to him, slapping on a quick smile and gasping, "Hey, I'm going to the store. You want to come along?" Maniac checked the sun. It was hardly up to the second stories. "Stores aren't open yet," he said. Amanda just gawked. She was a rotten liar. Maniac knew. He shook loose from the little ones and trotted on. He didn't know what, but something was wrong. The little ones jabbered and screeched and grabbed. He ran faster and faster. Mrs. Beale was out on the front with the yellow bucket soap suds spilling over the brim, a stiff bristle brush in her hand. She was scrubbing the house, the brick wall, scrubbing furiously at the chalk, grunting with the effort, her cheeks wet. He had been way too early, way too fast. Only the F had been scrubbed away. The rest was quite easy to read. The tall yellow letters, the same color as the scrub bucket. Fish belly, go home.
Yeah.
Why would that be a problem for Jeffrey?
Because it was the same dude who's tried getting him home on the black body. Was trying to get him back on the
No, it was.
black body.
Now, do we know who did that?
No.
No, so somebody graffitied with chalk, like either on the concrete. Was it on the concrete or on the house?
House.
Let's go back to the text. She was scrubbing the house, so the brick wall, somebody had written fish belly on there. What color is the belly of a fish? White. So it was like a term to be derogatory towards Jeffrey. Does that make him feel welcome?
No.
I mean, gosh, I can't imagine that. So they're trying to stop him from seeing it because Miss Beale and Hester and Lester and Amanda, they love him for the person that he is, regardless of skin color. But somebody made the decision to go write that on their house.
I feel sad for him.
I do too. I do too.